All right. Well, welcome everyone. Hello, my name is Gabriela Vokic, and I'm an associate professor of linguistics here at SMU in the World Languages and Literatures Department. And today I would like us to talk a little bit about how we can design assignments that resist AI use. So here's a quick outline of what I would like to be able to accomplish today. So first of all, I would like to share with you some elementary assumptions that inform this presentation. Then I would like us to very briefly talk about the challenges of AI misuse in our classroom settings. Then I would like to spend a decent amount of time talking about how we can create a whole course culture that disincentivizes AI misuse, because only in that particular context, only in that particular ecosystem can you meaningfully create and implement assignments that resist AI misuse. And then I have some examples of activities. Actually, I have some assignment types that I want to share with you that lend themselves for resisting AI misuse. Then I have a couple of examples from my own courses. If we have time, we have 2 activities for you, and then a couple of key takeaways. So here are my basic assumptions. First of all, I am assuming that at this point in time, there is no policing AI usage. Maybe 6 months down the line, maybe a year, maybe 7 years down the line. But at this point in time, this is a futile effort, and therefore, I don't think it's worth our time. Also, on a related note, if you catch yourself in this loop of thinking, well, are there students using it? When are they using it? How are they using it? Are they not using it? In which circumstances, right? Just simply assume that they use it, right? On a related note, for me personally, if we use it, which we do for in different ways maybe than our students, but we do use it, whether to craft emails or to, prep lectures or format your bibliography or what have you, but we use it. And then I think that it's not fair to ask the students to not do it. And then my last assumption is also my disclaimer, right? So I believe that it's not about designing assignments that AI cannot complete. In fact, 90, maybe even 95% of what I'm about to share with you today are things that AI can do and can do well, okay? But the trick is in how do we create assignments that are engaging enough, meaningful enough, relevant enough, so that students will want to do the work by themselves, okay? And we have ways of achieving that by means of content, but also by means of format, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so a quick question for you, right? So I know that we all know, we have talked about it at length about what are the concerns about AI misuse in academic environments, but I was just hoping that you could share with me, what do you think from your own perspective are the biggest concerns about AI misuse in our classes? My Zoom audience or my in-person audience, if you want to share, of all the things that we have talked about here on campus and elsewhere, what do you think is the biggest challenge, you think?
I'll jump in. Hi, Sean, in room. I, on an existential level, I'm basically assuming students are going to stop knowing how to write.
Okay.
Period.
So lack of skills, right? Skill development. Anything else?
My students, this is Ava, biology, also in room. My students don't know enough to know when the AI is hallucinating. And I teach pre-meds, and that's going to be a problem when they're your doctor.
Absolutely.
Big problem. They're going to kill people.
Absolutely. Excellent.
Well, yeah, I'm an anthropologist and fire scientist, and my concern is about the ability to think independently and critically and apply that, right? Whether that kind of context or in writing.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Addie, do we have any comments in the Zoom chat?
I don't see it so far, but one of my concerns is that we're outsourcing our cognition, right? And our students are outsourcing their thinking to the machines. So we don't know what impact that will have eventually. At some point, whenever we allowed our phones to store our phones, we stopped thinking about memorizing phone numbers. So what are we outsourcing that we won't be able to get back? So that's my concern.
Exactly. Thank you everyone for sharing. So here is a quick recap of what we already know and some of the things that you shared. So number one, erosion of academic integrity. We know that when they submit AI-generated work as their own, that undermines fairness, assessment accuracy, and my personal biggest challenge is it erodes that trust between instructors and learners, and it's really hard to bounce back from that. Then a common thread that we talked about here, reduced learning and skill development, right? So we know that when they over-rely on these tools, then they're really not doing what they're supposed to go to college for. So no problem solving skills, no critical thinking, synthesis, analysis, discipline related skills, all of that goes out the window. Then there's difficulty in detecting misuse, right? And that is a particular additional burden on instructors. I feel like since we started having these conversations, there's an additional duty added to my job description, one that I didn't go to school for, one that I'm not prepared for. I'm not a police officer, I'm not a detective, and I don't know how to deal with it properly. Then equity and access concerns, also concerns pertaining to privacy and data risks, and then also these perpetually shifting classroom expectations, right? So we try to sit down and figure out the best course of action, but then the next week we have to reevaluate everything. And so that has been a particular challenge. So then the question is, the question for me at least is not how do we fight these challenges? Hello. The question is not how do we fight these challenges? The question for me is how do we properly position ourselves in the face of these challenges so that we can constructively or productively deal with them? And to me, the answer is how to construct a whole course culture, a whole ecosystem that disincentivizes AI misuse. So the first thing that I want to bring to your attention is this. So it says one of the most important factors in designing assignments that meaningfully discourage inappropriate AI use is the context in which those assignments exist. So yeah, we can all create one or two successful assignments that resist AI use in isolation. But if your assignment is an exception to the rule, if it's an exception to your whole course culture, then the implementation might not be as successful, right? What am I talking about? If you want to design that one beautiful assignment that resists AI use, but overall your course culture is overtly punitive or threat-based, right? Then students are less likely to engage authentically with the work. Now, you take a look at my second bullet and you think to yourself, no, that's not my course. My course is not punitive. I don't threaten my students. Fair. However, I would like to challenge you to go back to just our traditional phrasing in our syllabi. If you miss these many courses, automatically you're failing the course. If you, any and all instances of cheating are going to be reported to the honor council. You know, if you don't turn in an assignment on time, you're already, losing 10% of the grade and things like that. So maybe not overtly threatening, but definitely not the most inviting thing to do. On the other hand, if you have a course-wide culture that varies curiosity, ownership, meaningful learning, then students will feel supported, motivated, and connected. And in turn, they are much more inclined to complete assignments themselves because they want to. So it's not about just two choices. Oh, I can do it on my own, or I can let ChatGPT do it. It's I want to do it because I want to, right? Because I can and because I'm motivated to do it. So basically, we're trying to tap into the student's intrinsic motivation. So if you're a visual learner, here's a nice summary of what I just talked about, right? So you want your assignments to be aligned with the whole course culture, right? So you need to think about a larger picture than just one or two isolated assignments. So you want to be more on this side of things than here, right? Because this promotes AI misuse and this discourages it. Okay, so how do we do that? Number one, try to connect with your students. I know that for those of you, whether here or online on Zoom, who are thinking, yes, but I have 50 or 100 students, I cannot meaningfully connect with my students. Fair. I know that you cannot do this in a one-on-one kind of setting, but there are other things that we can do. For example, take a look at your course syllabi. Take a look at your other course material. What explicit but also implicit messaging is there about how you go about your course? So So threats and punishments along the lines of what I talked about, they create this disconnect and this distance, and then that raises the potential for teaching. On the other hand, if you have, let's say, a welcome message, but a welcome message that goes above and beyond, welcome to Gabriella's Linguistics 101, but a welcome message that explains how the course works, and that it describes in which way the course will allow the students to reach their academic and maybe some non-academic goals, and also what resources you have put into place to make sure that they're supported and successful in the process of learning. Well, now that's a totally different story. Does that have to be every document that you use? No, but start somewhere. Start maybe with a syllabus or with some assignments and things like that. So creating a connection with your students, there's ways to do that if you cannot give them that one-on-one attention. Number 2, use more frequent low-stakes assessments instead of 1 or 2 high-stakes assessments. So we know from research that when students believe that a single exam or assignment or 2 will determine their whole success or failure in the course, they may decide that it is safer to cheat using AI than to risk a low grade. We know that these things are extremely stressful for our students. What can we do instead? So consider small or more frequent assessments that carry less weight in the student's final average. I actually do this in all of my courses, but I'll give you an example for my introduction to linguistics. So we do have one test around midterm time, and we have one final paper towards the end of the semester. Everything else, I have 15 smaller assignments over the course of a 14-week semester. That means that every week they have to turn a little something. They're shorter assignments, smaller assignments than your paper, but it adds up, okay? And the reason why I set it up in this particular way is because it also reflects my own teaching philosophy. I am really not interested in how much material they can regurgitate at 2 discrete points in time in the semester. Also, how many hours without sleep they can go. I'm absolutely not interested in that. And these are typically traits associated with exams. What I am interested in is their gradual progress from point A to B to C to D, right? And also, those smaller assignments allow me to not only test the concepts and their the elementary aspects of the field, but also to see whether they understand them in isolation, but also how they interact amongst themselves, and also how do they fit into the larger context of what we're seeing, which in this case is linguistics or second language acquisition or things along those lines, right? So then you can ask, okay, well, but then why do you have your exam? For me, my approach to exams is a very bare bones kind of approach, meaning my exams are set up in such a way that this is what you cannot not know after having taken a semester's worth of introduction to linguistics. So the very bare bones that I want them to know if they're not interested in pursuing linguistics any further, right? But all these other assignments allow me to pursue depth and breadth. Also similar to that, a piecemeal approach, right? So you can have smaller assignments that build toward a larger project or paper. I know that this is not new to many of us, but it might be new to some, right? So if you know that you have a final project, right, don't put your student in a position where they're going to have to panic and scram, right? Maybe let's start that conversation around the midterms, right? And so, okay, 2 weeks after the midterms, turn in, maybe an abstract or a proposal, or at least a thesis or a topic or something. And then 2 weeks after that, maybe, an introduction. And then after that, especially these things that overwhelm them, such as a literature review, break it up into 2 or 3, right? Because that is less intimidating to them. And then methodology, and then results and discussion and all that good stuff. And the reason why we're doing all of this is to lower the effective filter so significantly so that there is no motivation for them to cheat, right? They feel supported, they feel armed with knowledge, they know that they can do it, and therefore they will do it. And then the next one, it says, help students understand that you've designed your course to help them learn and develop. So I'm frequently under the perception that our students feel like they're left to their own devices, and that couldn't be further away from the truth, right? So number one, give them multiple opportunities to practice those skills and explain to them why are these particular skills of value in that particular field or for that particular unit. Make frequent connections to real world application. This is, I think, where We make many mistakes as teachers who have been in the field for a really long time. We know what the connections are. They're more than obvious to us, but not to our beginner students, right? And perhaps some of my favorites, consider ending every class period with can-do statements, or even better, ask them, okay, what have I learned? I've learned X, Y, and Z. How will what I learned today make me a better expert in my field, whether I want to be a doctor, a psychologist, a teacher, a statistician, a data analyst, what have you. And also, when it comes to tests and things along those lines, reassure your students that every question reflects material you've already worked through together, right? So before every test, before every important assignment, I tell my students, there is nothing here on these 4 or 5 pages of paper that we haven't done together, that you haven't read about, that you haven't talked about, that you haven't shared your views on. So there's absolutely no reason to stress about it. And there's definitely no reason to pursue other venues of completing this test. And then help students work productively with your feedback on assessments. And so this is especially important with assignments that don't have a do-over option, right? Because when students receive a low grade and they start panicking, and then they decide that it's simply not worth the panic and the stress, and they decide that they're going to take a shortcut next time and use ChatGPT to complete another test. But also this is important because with these kind of one-off types of assignments, there's this done deal perception. I'm sure you've seen, students who you give them the paper back and they just barely glance at it and then chuck it back, and it lands into the backpack. Other times it lands into the trash bin, right? So really, the assignments that don't have a redo option, they really think that it's the end of that story. There's nothing that we can do about it, but we can. What can we do about it? Help students by having them analyze their efforts and the feedback you provide so that they can be more successful next time. How do we do that? Well, you can create short prompts for them to respond that help them think about your feedback, understanding the progress, and also make plans, them making plans about what they can do next. What does that look like? Well, for example, you can ask, how long did I spend preparing for this assignment? Was that enough? Do I need to invest more time next time? I don't know. This is something that students need to answer for themselves. Excuse me. Also, what did I do while I worked on this assignment? Was I watching the next, Netflix show, or was I chatting with my roommate, or what was going on? Also, did I follow the instructions? Oftentimes they don't. Did I use the study guide? Did I use the essay outline, right? And then lastly, and most importantly, given the feedback that I received, what are the just two new strategies that I will try next time when I'm working on an assignment? And this is important because it creates that continuity from one assignment to the other with these assignments that don't have an opportunity for a redo. And it does away with this done deal kind of perception. Okay, well, I got, a D on this one assignment, but it's not the end of the world. Let's see what information I can extrapolate from there and pour that over into my next assignment, even though the assignments are not necessarily in the same category. And then it says, allow students to focus course assignments on their real interest, right? And I know that many of us already do that. I also want to acknowledge that this is easier for some and harder for others, right? For example, for me, if I have students who are, majoring in business or finance or something like that, it's hard for me to make that connection with, any aspect of language acquisition or something like that. But I think that we have an obligation to at least try to do that, because we know that when students see completing assessments as a path toward their own goals or interests, they're less likely to cheat. So what are some ways to do that? You can allow students to choose project topics and creative methods of expression, right? So for example, some years ago, when I taught advanced grammar, I had students write a poem in their Spanish, which was their heritage language. We know from research that heritage speakers are really insecure users of a language. So the purpose of that assignment was to show to them, I can write poetry. This is a hard thing to do, and I can do it. B, you can write poetry in this hybrid variety, right? And everybody was on board, but some students took it a step further, and so that they decided to add instrumentation to it, and then they loaded it up on YouTube. So it was absolutely remarkable. And of course, not everybody wanted to do that, but when they do want to, take advantage of that. And then, of course, hands-on activities, engaging in practical hands-on tasks. Again, it might not work for every field, but building models, creating art, conducting experiments, to setting up experiments as well. It requires skills and efforts that are beyond AI capabilities. Okay, so what are some examples of assignments that reflect this, this philosophy? Here are some alternatives that draw on students' creativity. So I'm just going to go through this list really quickly. Ads, development of a product or proposal, diary entry for a real or fictional character, letter to a friend explaining a problem or a concept, brochure from a real or imaginary business or organization, a performance, a poem, play or dialogue, webpage or video, work of art, music, architecture, sculpture, newspaper article, or editorial, right? So more creative options. Now, again, I know that many of you are thinking, no, this is not possible in my field. Yes and no, right? So I just want to encourage you to think about what you can do. For example, if there are mechanical engineers amongst us, they might say, hey, listen, the last bullet is not going to work because in mechanical engineering, we really don't do a whole lot of newspaper article writing. That may be the case, but also you can create an assignment or two where your students are going to inform the general public about the most recent findings or discoveries in your lab, right? So that is a perfectly realistic scenario. Then one tip here for you, if you're thinking, yeah, I can do this, but this is going to take a whole lot of time to grade. Yes and no. Remember that you can always rely on pair work or group work, right? Also, for a couple of different reasons. Number one, when you look at these activities here, when they happen in real life, mostly it's not a one-person job, right? So when you are recording a video, there's the content producer, there's the camera person, and so on and so forth. Newspaper article, same thing. You have the journalist, but then you have the editor, and so on and so forth, right? So there's no reason to create these unrealistic expectations of what they're going to be doing when they leave college. That's number one, right? Number two, I haven't really tested this out, as in I haven't done a controlled study, but I'd be inclined to think that if you group them together, if there's that one person who is thinking about using, you know, AI in an unethical fashion, right? There's going to be other students who are going to influence their thinking, and they're not going to do that, right? So I would say it's highly unlikely that there's going to be all four students in a group who are going to say, yes, let's all open ChatGPT and plug away at it, right? So some positive influence. I'm sorry.
But you must have amazing students, because mine will all go immediately first thing to ChatGPT.
Even if they work in a group?
Especially if they work in a group. That's the first thing they open up. They ask Claude or whoever their favorite chatbot is.
This is going off of your assumption in your first slide,
Yeah,
that they're all using AI.
Yeah.
yeah, they are all using AI, and that is their first go-to. So I have to say, I've had disastrous results with pair and group work.
Okay.
And my students, again, are different because they're going to be doctors, and they're not working in pairs or groups as doctors. It's them and the patient.
Yeah.
So it's a very different discipline. It might work somewhere else, but
mine
are all only driven by the A in their class, and they will do anything for that.
And that's why I keep saying, you know, not everything is going to work for everybody and for every single field, but I also want to encourage all of us to think about some of these things in a more, you know, in a more creative fashion. Also, another thing that I recently read, you know, maybe if you open it up to your students, and this is kind of going off on a tangent, but it's still related to this in a way. So I read recently that, you know, there are professors who will say you can use ChatGPT up to 50% in this particular task. Don't ask me exactly how they measure that and how they gauge that. But, you know, one interesting thing from that article for me was that the professor shared that when he opened up the door to that, he actually realized, and again, I don't know the details of how he measured this, but they never actually meet that 50% threshold. Okay. However, of course, when you open it up to something like that, you have to be in charge about, you know, what that 50% is, right? Okay.
Yeah. And so I didn't want to poo-poo
No.
ideas. I think they're fantastic. And I do some of this myself, where my top students, I let them be more creative and they create their own like clinical case study for their final exam. So definitely, I agree. There's a lot of ways to incorporate it into my classes. So thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. Okay, some alternatives that require analysis or evaluation. Again, I'm just going to go quickly through this list so that I have more time for my examples. Analysis and response to a case study, analysis of data or a graph, analysis of an event, performance or work, legal brief, review of a book, play, performance, debate, and things along those lines. Again, pair or group work works really well, at least in my experience. Also think about non-traditional formats, right? So, for example, if they're analyzing a chart or a graph for you, maybe they can do it in a video instead of in a paper or something like that. Alternatives that require work similar to what is required for a term paper, but that result in shorter documents. So we already touched upon this a little bit. So it could be an annotated bibliography, introduction to a research or a paper or essay. Also comparative analysis of 3 pivotal papers. We know that proper literature reviews intimidate them, right? And so let's see how we can break this up, or what could be the first step. So the first step could be pick, 3 pivotal papers for that particular topic and have them little by little, because it's about acquisition of skills, gradual acquisition of skills, and then building up on those skills, right? So, okay, so we have 3 papers that are really important for this particular topic or in this particular field. Let's compare the method, let's compare the conclusions, let's compare the results, let's compare, data collection methods, whatever is important to you. I think that the research proposal might be a little bit advanced, but then again, just starting off with an abstract, what are the properties of, a successful abstract and things like that. And then alternatives that require only that students understand course material. So the first one here, explanation of a multiple choice question. Now you're thinking, well, when do I have the opportunity to do that? Well, when you return the test, or when you have graded the test, you can go over the answers to kind of integrate the test into the learning process, so that it's not only an assessment tool. And what I like here particularly is not only the explanation of a multiple choice answer, but what gives me better results is students explaining why the answers that were not the adequate answer, the correct answer, why they were not an option, right? And so that is an even better reinforcement of the things that we learned. And then also, rather than asking multiple choice questions, make a shorter exam with open-ended questions that require students to show their understanding of key concepts. Here's an example of that. So it says, explain the key differences between innateness and imitation-based theories of language acquisition and discuss the evidence supporting each, right? So in a traditional multiple choice, true, false kind of test, this could have been at least 5 or 6 different questions. But with this one, right, it's a single question that kills multiple birds with that one stone, with the one question, because here they have to show me that they understand the premise of the innateness theory, of the imitation-based theory, how they interact together, how do they account or not for language acquisition, and how they fit into the larger context of language as a uniquely human ability, right? So like I said, these are a little harder to grade, but nonetheless very effective in, like I said, testing a couple of things at the same time. And then alternatives that require only that students understand the course material. This is another example. You can also craft a paragraph that incorporates all the aspects that you want to test. So often in language classes, we do what I'm showing here right now on the screen, right? So it says choose a topic, right? I'll give them a list of topics and write a paragraph of approximately 8 to 10 sentences. But it's not any old paragraph, because that would be hard to grade. I want to specifically see that you have, let's say, 3 instances of the preterite and the imperfect. I don't know, 5 instances of definite articles and 7 of indefinite articles, 5 instances of relative pronouns. And you have to have 7 out of the 10 vocabulary items from the word bank that I already provided. You have to use the formal register, right? And again, this is something that you can tailor to whatever you want to test. How would you go about this? Think to yourself, okay, what do I want to test? Okay, what do I want them to know? And then work backwards, right? And again, I'm sure that this would work for most, if not all, disciplines, maybe not with these exact specifications, right? And then lastly, or second to lastly, if you can say that, alternatives that require integration of many skills and types of knowledge. So posters, and I'll show that to you in a second. You can do that as a traditional poster or via this platform called Padlet. You can also use portfolios. I love portfolios because they demonstrate improvement or evolution of work and thinking over time. And this is something that not only you see, but if they keep the portfolio and if they work at it, right, they can see that improvement on their own, which is also very empowering for students. And then reflections of all kinds by students on what they have learned from an experience. And lastly, what I like to call the Uber alternative, it's the OER collaboration, so the Open Educational Resources collaboration, right? And so De Rosa and Giangiani have defined OER as an access-oriented commitment to learner-driven education and a process of designing and using tools for learning that enable students to shape the public knowledge commons of which they are a part, right? And this is important because it lets students help create and share knowledge while learning together in a collaborative and student-centered way, right? And so in pedagogy, we talk a lot about the fact that, you know, we want to have the student at the center stage of learning. We want them to take responsibility of their learning. And this is really a remarkable way to do it. Have I done it? I haven't, but it's really, really appealing, right? And it also gives them that responsibility. You are in charge of creating a certain body of knowledge that somebody else is going to learn, to use. Okay, so here are my examples. Excellent. So the first thing that we did was to critique the English as the official language proclamation. First of all, you can see that this is my whole assignment, no threats, no nothing, you know, it just says, analyze how President Trump's the 2025 proclamation declaring English the official language constructs and enforces power through language policy. Very simple instructions, read the proclamation, identify 2 to 3 key claims, what assumptions about language and identity underlie them, then critique. How does this policy empower or exclude groups? What social or linguistic consequences might result? Use concepts from class, and then they can break up into groups and add a little bit more. Now, why was this an assignment where they did not excuse me, use AI? Number one, we spent a decent amount of class periods talking about issues like linguistic variation, normative varieties, what does it mean to have normative varieties, language and power, language and identity. So they were properly armed with knowledge, right? And so they felt comfortable in that. That's number one. B, or rather two, think about the context. This is their country, this is their language. Many of them are monolingual, but many of them are also bilingual or heritage speakers of different kinds of languages. So what I'm trying to say is that they had a lot of skin in this game. They had something that they wanted to share with me, and that's exactly what they did. So this is an example of an assignment that worked really well. We have some chat comments.
Ask a question on that one.
Yeah,
How did
yeah.
you grade that assignment?
So sorry, I'd like to be.
Yeah, sorry, you're reading the chat. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
The chat.
So it depends. So this one in particular, because it was a in-class exercise that counts toward participation, oftentimes I will do it as a based on completion. Other times I will look at my criteria, right? So do you have 2 or 3 elements that you identified? How well are you connecting that with the theory? So that is, for example, one example where I use ChatGPT regularly, which is I have him, it, them create a rubric for me, right? And so then it's a little bit easier. But when it's a low-stake assignment, low-stakes assignment, it is not infrequent for me to grade it on a complete, incomplete basis, okay? And then the next one that I also really enjoyed is the one about language standardization. So similar thing, very short, right up to 250 words using academic English. That's the end of that story. And they were supposed to choose 2 non-standard grammatical structures in English that they believe should be standardized, right? And so they had to, first of all, select 2, then explain their choice. Why do you think this one and not that one deserves standardization? And then discuss who or what would benefit from this change, right? And then I gave them a list of factors to consider. I also gave them a little example. And again, they were prepared to talk about this. They didn't feel like they needed to outsource this to ChatGPT. They are native speakers of English, so they already relate to the language in a particular way. So they had their views about what should be standardized that is not currently standardized, right? So that's the first thing. And also on the same topic, and I'll show you another example of the same assignment. I think that one of the key properties of assignments that resist AI use are the types of questions that don't necessarily have a yes or no kind of answer, or black or white or something like that. So, here, this can still be correct or incorrect, right? So incorrect would be if you are talking about a feature that's already part of the English standards. Well, so that would be an incomplete, right? But there's many more points in between. And then a similar one, excuse me, is the language relativity assignment. So this is about the Worf-Sapir hypothesis, and it's about whether language or the grammar of our language influences how we perceive the world that surrounds us, or does this relationship go in the opposite direction? So even within the field of linguistics, there's a lot of controversy, and we don't really have a concrete answer to how this transpires, although we have better evidence today than, a couple of decades ago. But here's what they had to do. Take a position on the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So first of all, state your stance clearly. Do you believe that language shapes thought strongly, weakly, or not at all? Explain your reasoning by referring to at least one concrete example, and then address the counter arguments. Again, very short, up to 250 words. But again, it's not a situation where it's like this or it's not, right? There are different things to explore in between the two extremes. Again, this could be very incorrect, right? If you don't express your stance clearly, if you're not using any examples, or if you're using just the examples that we've seen in class during the reading, right? So there are ways to make this an incomplete, but the stakes are significantly lower. And then the other assignment that I wanted to share with you is the language and identity one. So this one, well, let's see what it says. It says, select a film that strongly explores themes of language and identity. Some examples are the ones that you can see here, wonderful movies if you haven't seen them. Watch the film closely, focusing on how language influences the characters' identities and their relationships. So this is a fairly standard written assignment, right? I've done this in the past in a written form, something along these lines, we all do it. But the way to proverbially spice it up was to ask them to create a video essay. For me, I thought that this could be conveyed in 5 minutes. It could be longer, right? And they had to go over this analysis that will typically happen in writing. So the benefits of this were that this was a little bit more fun for me to grade. This was also a really nice break for them, from the constant writing that we have to do every week. So this is an example of that. And then lastly, words that sell. It's about how language is used to persuade, influence, or manipulate the audience in advertising or the media. So they had to pick 2 slogans, 2 political ads, 2 social media posts, and describe the message. And then, of course, make the linguistic connection, right? So to analyze the linguistic choices, word choice, tone, rhetorical devices, and explain the intended effect. So this time around, I actually decided to share with you student responses. So the first student, and I asked for their permission to share this with you. The first student says, the first ad I found was an ad for Scrabble that has the words, "The only time you will be delighted to get syphilis," written out in Scrabble tiles, right? And so I'm not going to read all of this, but she says, using a disease that you do not want to get in real life, but has a high point value, uses humor as an emotional appeal to buy the game, and so on and so forth, right? So again, something that surrounds them on a daily basis, messages that they interact with on a daily basis, only, looked at from a linguistic a linguistic lens. And the next one, another one of my favorites, it says Apple's Think Different campaign promotes their products as tools for innovation and individuality. The slogan deliberately breaks grammatical conventions. So this is a really nice way to look at this from a linguistic lens. It breaks purposefully grammatical conventions, so using an adjective is where an adverb should go, which reinforces its theme of creative nonconformity, right? And it goes on and on. So again, this is where they feel like they are in charge of the assignment. You know, they are familiar with these topics. There's no reason to outsource this. And in particular, because it's not a huge investment of their time. And then lastly, what I wanted to share with you is this platform that I use for the posters. It's called Padlet. And excuse me. I'm not entirely sure how to describe Padlet. It's not really equivalent to PowerPoint or to Prezi or one of those. I like it because it has different types of formats and it allows you to produce something that would be, let's say, a first step or a prep in the creation of an academic poster. So for example, I have them pick a particular topic. This student talked about, historical linguistics, why in general languages change. And, you can see that they are plugging in some elements that we see in academic posters. So certain images, not any images, not decorative images, images that relate to a particular, to the topic that they're considering, conclusions, and things like that. And then here is the audio recording of the whole presentation. I also have a whole rubric and guidelines for how they should prepare this and how many images and what should be included in the, how much text should be in these styles, how long the presentation, and they adhere to that. And here's another setup that I wanted to share with you. It's in Spanish, but it's different in the sense that, so you can see that each one of this is a separate student poster and presentation integrated into it. You can also do video recordings. They don't have to be audio. But the reason why I want to share this one with you is to show that you can set it up in such a way that other students, their classmates, can go in and comment on their oral presentations and their posters. And I really like this one because when I'm running out of time towards the end of the semester, but I still want to integrate oral presentations and posters, then I have them do it in this particular way. So when they come up with their own presentations, I create one communal Padlet, for lack of a better term, and then they have to go in, they have to listen, they have to meaningfully comment, right? Because I also give them guidelines about what it means to meaningfully give feedback or comment when it comes to a poster. And then lastly, what I wanted to share is this example of my student from Introduction to General Linguistics. This is an example of allowing students to work from their sphere of interest, right? So this was a student who was majoring in environmental science, and she reached out to me asking to prepare a poster on language on climate change. I really wasn't seeing it, but she defended it well, and I said, let's go ahead and let's see what it looks like. And she did an absolutely remarkable job. Here is her audio recording, her sources, and so on and so forth. So that is more or less all I had for you. So I can open it up for questions, or we can dig into some of the activities. Whatever you would prefer is how we're going to go about it. Oh, yes, you're right. Okay. Thanks for this. I think this is a very important topic for us to keep talking about together. I've got another Zoom. Okay. Okay. One new one. Let's see if we can make it a little bigger. Love Padlets. I call them interactive multimodal boards. I like that. There's also Padlet Sandbox too. Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right. Anything else? Any questions? Well, if there are no questions, I guess we can look at some of these activities that I had for you guys, because we have a couple of minutes. So the first one, it says, what aspects of your course culture might be modified to create stronger alignment with assignments designed to prevent AI misuse? So remember that I said at the beginning, and if you, like I said, if you don't remember anything from this talk, the the one and only thing that I would ask you to remember is that these are not divorced from the rest of your course culture. So when you think back to your course culture, your course ecosystem, what are some things that maybe, what are some aspects that maybe you can change to make it more so that it looks like it lends itself better for these assignments that resist AI use? Yes. Yes, thank you.
One thing that stood out to me, I think, in all of this as a very interesting solution to at least part of these problems, and but also just the response of students to assessment, particularly of writing. It was the bit about follow-up assignments that ask the students to analyze their own paper and its their performance, what they were doing, and what the comments say, to force them to go through it. Right? If there's a follow-up assignment that requires them to be thoughtful about it, then they're engaging it with it in a way that maybe 80% of my students just don't. They shove it in their bag and they don't think about it again. That's their grade, and they just walk away.
Exactly.
And so that stood out to me as an insightful way of thinking about that.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, so I started doing specs grading a couple years ago to incorporate some of these suggestions. And I just struggle. My top students love it and they absolutely do this. Just my bottom students, I cannot get to participate. And to the point where last year, 70% of my students failed the final case study that we were doing because they used ChatGPT and it hallucinated and they didn't know enough to know that it. My top students try to use, and like GPT was wrong, and then they get like, amazing. That's what was supposed to happen, right? They knew enough that they knew it was wrong. So, this might be too big a question to ask for everybody, but how do we get the bottom students to do any of this stuff?
Well, I'm glad that you asked, because I was going to suggest just that. I don't know that this would be appropriate for the final exam or the final project, but again, think about the fact that you can lead up to that point. So I would say,
so we do 12 clinical case studies throughout the whole semester, and for the final exam, there's one patient that we have seen earlier, and we kind of go back through. So yeah, we have led up to this point. And again, my top students rarely use ChatGPT, but all my bottom students would use it, and I would ding them for it and be like, "Stop using Chat! You got it wrong!" And all this, and like the lack of them, like whatever I failed.
But have you considered pairing them up and like producing that positive influence? And also, I'm wondering, why are those? What's going on with the low performing students? Why are they there? And why, what's keeping them in that position and what's preventing them from progressing? So I think that, when there's this, peer collaboration, I think that they, maybe, I guess what I'm trying to say in these many words is that there may be some skills that your top performance have that your low performance haven't acquired yet. And I don't think that you necessarily have time to, unpack all of that, but maybe, putting them together to work together, that might resolve some of that. Now, of course, you probably won't be able to do that at the beginning of the semester, but after the first, round of grades, early, grade reporting, you already, we pretty quickly have an idea who is going to be here and who is going to be here. So I think that you have at least time to, play with some of that and see what results it gives you.
Good suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. I teach in the accounting field, and so it tends to be much more quantitative than qualitative, and so it's easier, particularly in the assessment area, to figure out whether they're doing the work or not. But around this idea of creating stronger alignment and using language to kind of set the tone at the top, if you will. I think what I hear you saying is that rather than saying if you use AI, you will be penalized and lose your grade, that kind of thing, approach it from the standpoint more of, if you don't use AI, here are the benefits to you in terms of learning, that you're more, these concepts are going to build on each other as you take additional classes. And if you don't really get these topics down now and you take shortcuts and use AI, if you avoid those things this way, if you avoid those things, here's the benefits to you. Do you find that to be I think this is the question you're asking. If you found that to be more successful, I guess.
I have found that to be more successful. I have started integrating AI into my classes. I think I've been doing it for a year and a half now, and the effective filter is significantly lower for the students and for myself. I don't feel this pressure to constantly police, and then also, I tell them openly. I mean, we do talk about some of these pros and cons that you were talking about. That's also a wonderful way of looking at it. Incorporated. Our syllabi are already super long, so an extra page is not going to do any damage. Thank you for coming. It's perfectly fine. So incorporating that one extra page is not going to do any damage. But I also, we frequently talk about these things, and I tell them, I want to know how you use it. And frequently they have something to teach us, and I'd be open to knowing something like that, right? So I think this is really important. I think that the conversations that you have about AI in class are really important to have a huge impact on whether they will or won't use it. I think if we're all acting like it doesn't exist, but then behind closed doors, we're trying to figure out, are they doing it or not? This is a recipe for disaster in my experience, at least. But yes, I am using it. I do want to test this element that I told you about, the allowing them to use it up until a 50% mark. I don't know exactly what that would look like in my field. I would have to sit down and figure it out, but that's another thing that I want to implement. Any thoughts?
Well, I think largely I absolutely agree with you. Kind of tied to the how do we the getting the bottom students is, I think in upper division courses, students are going to be more invested.
Of course.
They're the majors. They're planning on taking this is what I'm hoping my career to be in. So I want to be able, it's the intro courses where there are going to be a lot of non-majors. Somebody's like, I'm just taking this to fulfill an elective, whatever. And so they're not invested. And so like whatever is the easy way out is where I feel the need to try and do the most on this. That what I've been doing is sort of like way more in the class stuff. Good old Respondus lockdown browser type of stuff rather than outside assignments, stuff that is sort of like component, like, okay, I'm going to keep pushing you out, like, here are the 5 things that you need to know. And I'm almost doing like in my Catholic school, not sort of like stand alone with these 5 things type of thing. And they're like, sir, yes, sir. That moves towards what used to be a final term paper, but realizing the AI thing now, it's in-class presentation, and it is a group presentation. So again, working group thing, but I'm aware that in the presentation, they can still be using AI. But even if it is AI, they need to understand what AI is saying to them so that they can try and express it out to the other people. So even if AI is the one that's teaching them rather than me.
Yes.
And if AI is teaching them wrong, then I can like, you're doing that wrong. That's incorrect. So those are the things that I've been doing for my intro classes. But I think there is kind of an implicit, I see in my experience, fault with your basic assumptions in the first thing. I don't use AI.
You don't?
At all.
Okay.
So the idea of like we're using it, so it should really like I'm not using it.
And that's fair. That's fair. Though I have to say, I think that you're in the minority with that approach.
Well, and then yesterday I quizzed my seniors about AI just in terms of their own lives. There was no judgmental or sort of like punitive. It didn't have anything to do with any assignments. And while they, were aware that they would be searching here and there, they seemed very sort of like they themselves seemed to be kind of resistant to it. How much they are outside of the people that are looking for shortcuts. Cheaters are always going to cheat.
And that's precisely the thing. I mean, like I said, this is not a foolproof method.
Find it out.
Yeah. But I mean, those people are going to be able to cheat even when we down the line have the tool to discover that, this has been, unethically used. So, I mean, those students have existed, since forever. But I do hear what you're saying. And I just wanted to share to kind of conclude that the examples that I shared with you today are from my introduction to general linguistics class. We don't even have a linguistics track, a linguistic minor, absolutely nothing. It does have 3 tags that I recently added. This is the first time that I'm teaching it like this. And again, I'm not going to put my money on any single one of these factors, but I will say a combination of those, depending on the field, might work. So maybe shorter assignments, maybe more frequent assignments, maybe those, how do you establish the connection with what you teach and the real world? Those are things that are intuitive to us, but not to them. So some combination of those will have to work for you. But that's why I said I don't have a magic formula that will create one assignment that is AI proof. Well, so thank you, everyone.
You bet.
And I'll see you next time.